Hello, this is a tutorial for home recording sharp, good quality sound. This is part one of the tutorials. They are quite dense with explanation, so you may have to listen to them more than once to get a good understanding of what I'm explaining. I'm going to assume that you will be using a computer to record sound in a home system. The same general rules can apply if you're using a more actual studio-based setup, but this is geared for computer home recording. To save time, I'm not going to list the equipment and software I use. It's listed in the comments notes section of this video. Section 1. There are 3 golden rules for good working practice when it comes to recording sound and using digital technology, basically computers, to do it. Rule 1. When you connect or disconnect any audio devices, always have the input of the device you're connecting to switched off. You can get spikes of static electricity which jump when you connect or disconnect wires, and that spike can be a hell of a lot greater than what the equipment is designed to cope with. It only takes one spike, especially with computer equipment, to damage it permanently. And when you damage it in that way, the only way to repair it is to buy a new piece of equipment. Rule 2. Avoid distortion on your master recordings. If you want to add distortion, you can do it afterwards. But if you have distortion in your master recording, and then later realize you didn't want so much, you're stuck with it, and you have to re-record the sound again. Rule 3. If you're changing a sound in a way that cannot be undone, save it under a different name. Don't just overwrite the original file, because again, if you get it wrong or decide that you want to do something different, you're stuck with the altered file, and to go back, you have to re-record the sound all over again. So rule 1. Always connect and disconnect appliances with the input of the device you're connecting to switched off. Rule 2. Avoid distortion on your original recordings. Rule 3. Save fundamentally changed sounds under a different name. Don't overwrite the original file. Section 2. Equipment. You don't need top-of-the-range, expensive, sophisticated equipment to record and produce good quality, sharp-sounding music. Good enough equipment is good enough. It doesn't have to be any better. The equipment you have isn't so important as the way you use it. However, your equipment has to be of a minimum quality to make good quality sounding music. The best kind of mic to use for studio recording is a condenser microphone, and the better ones normally have a 3-pin connection needing a phantom power source, which is normally provided by the unit they're connected to. You can use a live or cardioid mic, and these do work well in the studio, but they have a shorter range and you do lose high-end frequencies. There is a bit of a compromise with a live mic. A few years ago, I even had a conference mic, a £50 Sony thing, which I used with my portable mini Discman, and it was good enough to be able to record fireworks and thunderstorms and even birdsong outside. And after learning how best to use it, I was able to record vocals with it too. So really, as long as the mic you're using is good enough quality, you can use virtually any mic to record sound with. Working out how to make your equipment do what you want. The sound card that you use does all the work. It's the equivalent of the engine in a car. All the sound you record will most likely go in through your sound card, and everything you play back will go out through it. So you need a good quality sound card so you can hear what's actually going on clearly. You need something like a creative sound card costing at the very least between £50 to £100, or the equivalent of another company. Ideally, it's best to use a desktop or tower computer with an internal sound card, because then the sound card behaves like a part of the actual computer. You can use external sound cards, but they can be problematic. With some external sound cards, you can get a time delay or time lag between the sound going in and what you hear. The professional term is latency, and it can be extremely distracting if you're trying to record vocals or play an instrument and there's a time delay between what you perform and what you hear through the computer and through your stereo. You want to look for a sound card that has ASIO technology incorporated. That's ASIO. This reduces latency to the point where you don't need to worry about it. You need at least a half-decent stereo to listen to the sound that you're making. Ideally, you want to make music using the stereo that you normally listen to music on, so that when you're making your own music, you can compare how good it sounds to the music that you've bought that's been professionally produced and engineered. Really, all you need is an amplifier and speakers and headphones. But the important bit is that you can switch off the speakers and only listen to music through the headphones. That's a vital bit of home recording. You can't realistically record good quality, clean sound with vocals or instruments if the sound is playing through speakers. It's too messy to realistically use in a professional sounding recording. You really need to use headphones. And in-ear headphones aren't really much use because the detail is unreliable. You need to have headphones that cover your entire ear, or at least the smaller sort that sit on your actual ear hole. In-ear headphones aren't really any good for recording sound with. You probably can use them. I'll be honest, I've never tried, but I wouldn't recommend it. You need some form of isolated recording medium for your master flat recording that is created by your microphone before it's affected or really amplified or changed in any way. You can use something like Minidisc or a CD recorder or a handheld recording device like an MP3 recorder, or there are units available if you ask at your local decent audio equipment retailer. You can change the settings in your computer to only record only what is coming in through the microphone or line-in inputs. So you can actually use the computer as an isolated recording medium, but that means that the processing power the computer has is no longer focusing on just playing music. It's also concentrating on recording, and that can start causing glitches because it's having to work too hard on too many things. That's not really a problem if the projects you're working on are fairly simple. Like, for example, if you're making music as a four-piece band, but if you are working on more complicated projects where you've got multi-layered vocals and instruments, the computer can start struggling. So really, if you can, you're best off having an isolated medium that isn't inside the computer and doesn't require the computer to do any extra work. For making music using a computer, which is how I would say most people would do home recording these days, you need your computer to behave as if it is a CD player or DVD player. It has to play the music completely and utterly flat. Any sound effects or EQ settings or environment or soundstage settings that you have set up on your sound card, volume controls, you need to switch them all off. A good test to know if your computer is playing music utterly flat is if you rip a CD as a WAV file and play it back using the computer, at the same time play the same song on CD through your stereo and switch between the CD player and your computer. If your computer is playing utterly flat, there should be no difference between the sound coming from the computer and the CD player. The reason you need to do this, if you can, is so that the sound packages and sounds that you are using are played true. So that if you burned the recording you've been making onto CD and played it on a CD player, it would sound exactly the same on any stereo. But if you do have EQ and sound effects setting on your computer active, your computer is doing all the tone control and soundstage work. So your music will only sound good on your computer. If you want your music to sound good and crisp and sharp on any stereo or any computer, you must have your computer controls utterly flat. Like I say, if you rip a CD and play the file through computer and play the original CD at the same time, there should be no difference between them. That's the only way you can make your music sound as crisp and sharp as if it was commercially produced. The next processes for your recording are talked about in part 2.